I'm Phil. I'm a German-trained cabinet maker and architect, and I've worked in joinery, shop fitting, architecture, design, teaching, and I'm currently the face of one of Europe's largest and fastest growing power tool companies. Now, what connects all these topics together is a question of how does one material connect to the other? Because in design, it doesn't matter what material you're using, that is the one question you will always have to answer. Now, as AI pushes us further and further into the digital world, I focus on a lost topic, re-grasping the physical experience. I'm building 400 wooden joints, exploring what they can teach us, sharing thoughts on architecture and life, because connections shape the way we experience. Now today I'll be talking about the half-lap joint, the mitered half-lap joint, and the beveled half-lap joint. Okay, so let's jump into the standard half-lap joint. I had the idea that I wanted to cut the timber to length with a saw that I built back in my apprenticeship, and it's called a Gestellsäge in German. And I'm not sure what the English name for this is, but it's a very traditional saw in Germany, and we actually built this, and I haven't used it since, and that's over 10 years ago. It's got a Japanese saw blade in it that's meant for pulling, although standard with these Gestellsägen is a push movement for sawing. So it didn't work well at all. Maybe I was just really terrible at it, I'm not sure, but it was no good at all. And I really messed up the cuts. So I decided from there on that I will pre-cut the timber to length before I start with the joints. So I swapped from the Gestellsäge, I hung this one up on the wall, swapped over to a normal Japanese handsaw. Now, as soon as the timber was at its correct length, I got straight into making the joint, and this is how it turned out. Now, it's basically just two cuts. It's one cross grain and one long grain cut. And the saw is incredibly sharp, and it's a really good saw. I wasn't very used to it. It was the first time using it, and I'm sure I'll get much better at it. So I'm not 100% satisfied with how this turned out. There's a big gap in the middle. Maybe you can see that. Shocking, very embarrassing actually to show this. But as I said, this is probably a joint. If you make this joint on a construction site and you pump 2 screws in it, everyone will say, that's fine. Good enough, well done. Off to the next one. So I'll just say this is a very realistic one. It's not for show, it's not great. Now, I was struggling with the long grain cuts because they're fairly long, and you've got two sides of the saw that one's a bit rougher, one's a bit finer. I'll get into that later. But I basically always missed the line that I had drawn. This joint is a purely geometrical joint. Now, it can't withstand any loads if it's not, fastened in a mechanical way, so with screws or with dowels or with pegs or something, or in a chemical way, so that means with any glue or adhesive. It's purely there to get things flush, to connect two pieces of wood to each other, and to not have double the material height. Half-lapped because you take out half of the material and they lap over each other. Makes sense. Okay, so the next one is called a mitered half-lap joint. And as the name says, it's similar to the one beforehand. It's just that the lap from the half-lap is mitered. That means it's got the 45-degree angle cut, which is basically just meant for show, makes it look a bit nicer. It's a bit of a fancy connection. It's not very complicated. I had to think about this one quickly because on one side you basically just take out the corner, and on the other hand you take out way more. Okay, as I said before, the saw has two sides to it. One side is for cross grain cutting, one side is for long grain cutting. The long grain cut side has got fewer teeth and they are a bit deeper, so longer. And that is so that the fibers that you cut along the grain will always be a bit longer and they can get transported out much easier. Now the cross grain cuts, the side of the saw has got more teeth and they're tighter together and they create smaller sawdust that comes out of it. So somehow for me there's always a cleaner cut on the cross grain side And here I think I did a bit of a mix between doing the long grain cut with the long grain side and the cross grain side, just to get used to the saw a bit and to see how it performs. Now the mechanical properties of this joint, the mitered half lap joint, are the same, very similar to the ones of the half lap joint. It can basically not hold any loads if it's not fastened together mechanically or chemically. But it's a nice joint. You can get a nice miter in the front, and it's often used for appliances that have to look a little bit fancier. And just wanted to say that setting the trajectory of the cut right at the beginning is really important and very vital to make sure that the rest of the cut will be nice and clean. So that means you have to start off with a very clean few cuts to make sure that you stay aligned with what you've marked up. So yeah, this one's okay. I'm fine with how this one turned out. It's not 100% perfect, and that's fine. That's not what this is about. It's not the goal. But I understand how it works. All good. It's a beautiful little joint. Okay, and the third joint that I built is called the beveled half lap joint. It's also a half lap joint, and it's beveled, as the name says, which means that the one end is wider than the other end of the connecting bit. So they interlock, and it's got mechanical properties if it's wedged in between in 4 sides, I guess. So 1, 2, 3, 4. If you would wedge it in somewhere, if it's in between somewhere, you know, it can't go anywhere. You can pull on it and it would interlock itself. So making this one actually reminded me of how to cut longitudinal cuts, so long grain cuts, that are slightly on an angle. That means you cross the grain as well. So you get a long grain cut with like a half a cross grain as well. So that does stuff with your saw. So you draw up the line that you want to cut, and instead of putting it on the bench like this, vertically, you put it slightly on an angle so that the line that you've drawn is vertical. And that is there to hopefully help your muscle memory, if you have any, to cut a straight line down and to support the actual angled nature of the cut. That actually worked very well with the second part of the joint. The first bit I had to correct slightly, and that's where this little nook comes from in here. I had to reach under the saw and push to the side and correct it. So don't do this at home, it's very dangerous. You can really cut your hand, especially if you've got an extremely sharp saw. I didn't, so that's all good. But yeah, it's better to start off properly rather than correct it later on. Alright, so those were the first 3 joints that I made. Those are the absolute basics of all joints, and you can use them literally anywhere. The next ones I'm doing will involve another tool. I'm gonna use my lovely chisels that I have. Looking forward to that again. And hopefully those joints will also interlock, so I don't have to hold both of them. What I also noticed while making these is that I used pre-cut timber, so thickness and width. As soon as I've used up all that timber, I'm gonna mill my own again, because it's just a little bit more accurate and the accuracy follows the accurate marking up. Let me know about your experiences with these joints. Maybe you've built them before, maybe they're too basic for you. But yeah, just let me know. Catch you in the next one.